Okay, Rabbosai, good evening. We're late and we have a lot of ground to cover because it's Sanhedrin. So today we're going to be learning Daf Chaf Beis. We're starting about 15 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, which might as well be a whole blot on its own. And we're actually going to finish at the very, very last line on the next page, which is the end of the parak. So we'll be finishing Parak Kohen Gadol and moving over to Zeborer tomorrow night. And then tomorrow night, we can actually do some damage. We can do a blot and a half in Yirtz Hashem. Let's get started. We're at the two dots, 15 lines from the bottom of Chaf Aleph from the base, where it says, V'chosev Sefer Torah Lishmo, that a Kohen, that a Melech, has to have a Sefer Torah. So Tana, the blot says, he's not allowed to benefit from the one of his father. Namely, he has a separate shiur, a separate obligation to have his own Sefer Torah. Amar Rava, Afal pi shehinicho lo avosav la'adam Sefer Torah, mitzvah lichtov mishalo. We have a mitzvah, the Melech has a mitzvah to write his own Sefer Torah. Shneamar, v'ata kisvu lachem es hashira. Asks the Gemara, Eis ve'abayit, v'chosev lo Sefer Torah lishmo, shelo yisna b'shal acherim, Melech in hedyot lo. The limud that we're making from this brisa is not clear from the page as to how we know this, but from the context of the brisa where it's located, when we see it in full, we wouldn't be asking this question. But the Gemara infers from this brisa that this halacha is true by a melech and it's not true by anybody else. So the Gemara says lo tzricha. Really, what's going on over here, says the Gemara, is that a melech has lishtei toros. He has two toros. Look at the Tanya. The Brisa writes v'chasav lo es mishneh from the word shnei too. What does this mean? Kosev lishmo shtei toros, that the melech has two different toros. Achas sheyotza v'nichneses imo v'achas shemunachas lo beveis kenazo. One that he travels with and one that he keeps at home. Osa sheyotza v'nichneses imo eno nichnas ba lo lebeis hamerchatz v'lo lebeis hakisei. Why is he not allowed to bring them into the beis hamerchatz or the beis hakisei? So we just always assume it's not kavadik. So the Gemara gives a svara, Shne'emar, based on the pasuk by Sa'imo v'karabo, the word v'kara. It's makam ha'ra'ui likrosbo. But because you're not allowed to be korei over there, you're not allowed to bring it there. That's what the Gemara said. Amar zotravi temamar ukva betchila nitna Torah liYisrael b'chsav ivri v'lashon hakodesh. Initially, the Torah was given over with ksav ivri. Ksav ivri is not modern day Hebrew. It is a vintage form of the alphabet that it actually, there are great pictures. I worked today. They have a mincha in that building. So I chapped the mincha and they had the Koren Sanhedrin, like the English one. So I looked in there and it had a picture and it put next to, side by side, the Aleph Beis that we're familiar with and the Aleph Beis of Ksav Ivris. Totally different language. Some of the letters have some similarities, but like, for example, the ayin is a triangle, and that's how we got to our cursive ayin, which kind of sort of was a derivative of that. Anyways, it's not the same language, but initially the Torah was given, and let's just say at the outset over here, this is one shita, and there are others as we'll soon see, but it was written in Ksav Ivri, this old Hebrew language, the Lashon HaKodesh, and it was read in Hebrew. And then later, and then later the Torah was given with Ksav Ashuris. Ksav Ashuris is what we have, the beautiful block letters, clean, and Velashon Arami, and they would read the Torah in Arami so people could understand what was going on. Biru lehen Yisrael Ksav Ashuris Velashon HaKodesh, and the Jewish people chose. What does it mean? The Jewish people chose. It's a Torah. What are we choosing? So these are difficult Gemaras, and they require a lot of time to understand. And what did they do? So that's what the Jews chose. But v'hinichel lehedyotos Ksav Ivris Velashon Arami, the big Amaratzim, the people who really didn't know what was going on. They weren't the big learners. They kept the Torah in the Mamalashim, which was in their language that they could understand, in the Ksav Ivris and Lashon Arami. Ma'an Hedyotos, says the Gemara, who were these people who were Hedyotos? Some of Chizda Kusai, they were the Kuthians, whatever they were, not such a learned group of people. Ma Ksav Ivris, what did this language of Ksav Ivris look like? Amar Chizda Ksav Livona. Rashi says Livona, last two lines of Rashi, Libra Maschel Livona, Osios Gedolos, Ke'ein Osan Shekosvin Bekamios Mezuzos. It's the types of letters that we see in you don't have cameo so much, but in mezuzos, probably means a block letter type of structure. Yeah, permission. That's not the right word, but how are they able to change the actual letters? Based on the pasuk of Mishnah. The pasuk says that they. Let me just.
Obviously, the language isn't different, but
Yeah, the pasuk says. I can't find it right now. Where is it? The pasuk says, "Oh, here it is." The Torah that changes, which is dangerous. Torah that changed. So we have to figure out what that means. And one of the arguments that's given nowadays for the accuracy of the Torah is that from now until the time of the Rambam, there really were no deviations, which is super impressive for people who have been nomads effectively. And we've, other than after 1948, we've really been all over the map and not connected to one another. You know, Israel was the great equalizer, brought all the Jews back together in a great way, even from Chutz La'aretz. So it's pretty impressive. But nevertheless, your question's good, and I don't have a good answer for you. We would have to learn the sugya up in full. The Gemara says 5 lines from the bottom. Tanya, we have a brisa. Rabbi Yossi Omer Roi Haya Ezra Shetinos in Torah al Yado LiYisrael Ilmale Lo Kidmo Moshe. Ezra was on a level. I mean, Moshe preceded Ezra, but had it been that the Torah wasn't given yet until the times of Ezra, he would have been the man. The Moshe who Omer Moshe Allah El Elokim. The Ezra Omer who Ezra Allah Mi Bavel, same language of Allah. Even though by Ezra it seems to be more technical, but nevertheless. It is an equivalence between the two to some degree. Ma'aliyah ha'amar kan Torah, afaliyah ha'amar lahalan Torah. Both words of Allah are telling us that they were both just. I mean, it's hard to give compliments. They were the top of the food chain when it came to Torah. The Moshe who Omer ve'ositzi v'Hashem ba'isi lelamed eschem chukim u'mishpatim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had commanded Moshe to teach Torah to the Jews. Be'ezra Omer ki Ezra. And he was doing the same thing with his people. So again, bless you. So again, he was really shaykh to be the person who would bring Torah to Klal Yisrael. Unfortunately for him, he was Ezra just lived later, so it didn't pan out.
Did it happen when they were involved?
This was by Ezra, yeah. So there was before Ezra and up to Ezra, and then Ezra changed it, yeah. And this is exactly the next line of the Gemara. I don't know if you're cheating or something like that, but that's what the Gemara says. The text actually changed in the times of Ezra. The pasuk says, and this is a pasuk from Ezra. The pasuk says, "Uchsav hanishtava," and the writing that changes, kasuv Aramis. It was written in Aramaic, umeturgam Aramis, and was translated that way. And then Uchsiv, it says later, then this was speaking about Belshazzar, who was the king. And then Loche Halein Ksav al-Mikra, they woke up in the morning, there was script on the walls. Loche Halein Kasv al-Mikra, they didn't know how to read the writing on the wall. Upashar lo dala malka, and there was no explanation to give the king. Uchsiv, the pasuk also says, V'kasav es mishneh Torah hazos. So it says the Gemara, Ksav ha-ra'ui lishtanos. It's a writing that we are able to change. Now, we are not able to change it, but it seems pretty clear that there was, at least in version number 1 of the Gemara, we're going to see 2 other shitas in a moment. But according to the first approach of the Gemara, the text of the Chumash was written in a different text first. It's not to say that the letters were different, like it wasn't different words. The font is probably, and it's not font. It's really, it's a dialect of Hebrew. Is probably the right way to say it. So if it would say shalom, it still said shalom. It just, instead of shin lamed like we know, it was whatever the shin lamed looked like for them. So whatever it was. So that's ksav ha'roy lishtanos. What's that?
Whatever we call Ashuris, they don't have that. I showed it to
who's the they?
The Assyrians of today.
No, but that's not a raya for the history books. That's just right now. That's just not what they learn in school. I wonder if they could read cursive Hebrew. Yeah, when I get haircuts at Michael's, I hear them talking, and sometimes I try to insert myself in the conversation. It's just too fast, and and also they're very guttural because they speak properly. I mean, it really sounds Arabic, even though it's not Arabic. Although sometimes it feels Arabic, but I think that's just my brain talking. Lama Nikra Ashuris. Why was this more beautiful ksav, the one that we changed to with Ezra? Why was it called Ashuris? Sha'ala imahim me Ashur. Says the Gemara, because it came up from Ashur, which was a location. Tanya, we have a brisa, and this is the next shita. We saw one shita that before Ezra it was font or dialect X, and afterwards it was Y. Rabbi Amar B'tchila b'chsav zed nitna Torah l'Yisrael. No, and initially the Torah was given over in this ksav, referring to ksav Ashuris. Kevan shachatu, and once the Jewish people did an avera, nefach lahen leroitz, it became something that was literally translated as shattered, but it means that it was forgotten. Kevan shachazru, when they did tshuva, echzirulam, then they were able to then write ksav ashuris again. Shenemar shuvu levitzaron asiri hatikva gam hayom magid mishneh ashiv lach. I'm going to give you that other change. I'm going to give you the changed language back to you. And according to Rebbe, lama nikra shma ashuris, because when we asked this question 6 lines ago, it was not Rebbe. Shemeusheres b'ksav. It's the most meushar. It's the most beautiful. It has the most, and it's quite a beautiful ksav. When you see a nice Sefer Torah, oh, it's masok midvash v'nofes sufim. So when I was in Eretz Yisrael in February, and I ran this mission for the OU, and we went to an army base that holds on to all the Sifrei Torah for when the Chayalim are traveling. They had a Sefer Torah there, 700 years old. I have a picture of it. 700 years old. The skin was deer skin, but it's not like our parchment. It had a glossy look to it. I'll have to show you a picture later. It was orangey, tan, maybe light brown is probably a little bit better. But most of the ksav was really very visible. But not all the letters look the same. Now, first of all, they weren't Ashkes like we are. So we're used to seeing whatever the Ashkenaz. This was from Iraq. This Torah was from Iraq.
Standing up.
This was in a it was a Sephardic Torah, yeah. It was standing up, and they opened it as the oldest, I think one of the oldest Torahs that they have. I think it's 700, 800 years old. But their lettering, like the letter Fei was like coiled, like it had like it didn't stop. It like kept going as like a spinning. Fascinating. Maybe it's not Leikuva. I'm just saying. I'm sure people use it. I'm sure the Rabbanim Chashuvim, Sfardim, Yemenite, a whole different. But it didn't look like a Torah. To me, it didn't look like it. I'm not a bucky whatever, but it just doesn't look right. They say about shul rabbis, there's only one area in halacha you need to know without looking things up. And that's what happens if there's a mistake in a Sefer Torah. Right now, I need your answer right now. You got 150 people waiting. Everything else, you know what? I'll get back to you. I'll call you tomorrow. Hilchos Nida, let me look it up. When it comes to whether or not a Sefer Torah is kosher. So the rabbis got to know how to paskin a shayla. Okay, says the Gemara, a third shita still. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, first of the middle width lines, I should say, 8, 9 lines down on Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Amar Mishum Reb Elazar ben Parta, Sha'amar Mishum Reb Elazar Hamodai, Ksav Zeh Lo Nishtana Kol Ikar. There was never, ever a change in the Torah. Shenemar Vavei Ha'amudim. Vavei Ha'amudim was a reference to how the Beis HaMikdash was built, referring to these particular poles and sockets. But Ma'amudim Lo Nishtanu, just like the types of pillars that were used in the Mikdash were not changed. Af Vavim Lo Hishtanu. Even, and this is a play on words, the letter Vav never changed. Now, in the Ksav Ivri, the letter Vav looks different than in Ksav Ashuris. So what the Gemara is saying is the Vavim were not Nishtanu. The Vavs that were in the Torah are the same ones from Har Sinai. No changes at all. According to that, the Sifrei Torah that we have are exactly, whatever the word exactly means, they look the same letter system. Now, I just highlighted that from the Sefer Torah in Iraq, they had different little sprachs. Okay, there are those kinds of differences, but there's no like, the Vav is still a Vav. Be'etzem, the Vav is still a Vav. It's a straight line. The Omer, the pasuk says as well, "Ve'el haYehudim kichsava michil shona, ma leshonam lo nishtana." Just like the Jews, their language never changed. Aksavam lo nishtana, their handwriting also never changed. If that's true, says the Gemara, Elamani mekayim es hamishna Torah zos, the second version of the Torah, the second writing, I should say. Says the Gemara, no, that's l'shtei Toros. Achas shiyosav v'nichneses imo v'achas shemunachas bebeis genosav. That's how Reb Shimon ben Elazar darshans the pasuk. It doesn't mean that there was Ksav Ivri and then they changed it. No, it was talking about something they darshan the pasuk totally differently. So this is how divergent. It's a wild thing. The Chachamim are sitting in the base medrash. They have a chumash in front of them. They look at the pasuk that says as Mishnah Torah Zos. One person says we must have received the Torah in Ivri and changed it to Ashuris. The other person must have thought they were out of their brains. Are you crazy? Pashat, that's not what happened. This is a din about a melech having two Sifrei Torah. Same pasuk, wildly different interpretations of the pasuk. Wild.
I think it's Maseches somewhere else about if the glucose were in establish where you're establishing.
Did we learn that?
I think so.
I remember the discussion in the Gemara says that the letter mem was the bigger nace, which
Yeah.
means that the letter mem looks like our letter mem. That should be. But I don't know what it looked like in Ivri, so I mean, we have to Google it and see what the mem looked like. But there were certain letters that were omed benes because, so at least we know what one letter looked like in the luchos. Says the Gemara, Osa sheyotzes v'nichnes asimo, the one that would travel with the king. Osa oso kimin kimiyev v'tola bizro, he had to hang it on his arm. It was a very small Sefer Torah. You remember the Torah in basement, the Torah in Brian's house is tiny. It had to be even smaller. I don't know if that's possible. I mean, it's so tiny. It's what is it, 8 inches tall with the cloth? The ksav is 5 inches in height. I'm a berech, 5 inches in height, and it had the same number of lines and the same number of words. It's unbelievable that someone could write it. They're tiny. So that's what the king had to wear on his arm. Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, a famous pasuk, one that we have in the front of our shul by the Amud, Shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid. Says the Gemara, got it, I understand. We know that the Melech would wear a Sefer Torah on his arm based on that pasuk. Ve'idach, what do the other people hold? What do they do? Hai shivisi mai darish be. They say, Hahu mibayle kid Reb Chana bar Bizna. The Amar Reb Chana bar Bizna, Amar Reb Shimon Chasida. Amispal tzarach sheyira atzmo kilu shchina kenegdo shnemar shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid. That's why we put it in front of a chazan. The chazan should have a little yira shamayim, that when they're leading the people, they should have Hashem in mind, that the shchina is kenegdom. So that's why, according to this track in the Tanaim and Amoraim, shivisi is not to tell me that the melech should wear it on his bicep. You know, we have lahavdil, a billion lahavdils. Is when people go running, they have the upper bicep pouch that they put their iPhone in. You know, like, moms, I feel bad even making it. It's not really, but they would wear something on their arm. We don't know what the contraption looked like. Now, the Gemara says the Reb Shimon, it's actually the Reb Shimon ben Elazar, the same Rashba we saw before. Reb Shimon ben Elazar, Damar Ksav Ze Lo Nishtane. According to him, we have a problem. Remember the pasuk at the top of the page? My loche halein kasvel the mikro. Why weren't they able to read it? That's what the pasuk said. The Belshazzar wasn't able to read the writing on the wall. Why not? If the ksav never changed, everyone should be able to read the ksav ashuris. Everyone was reading it yesterday. Why did they not know today? So the Gemara says, Omar Rav. Rav says, Begematria ichtiv lahon. It was written in a gematria, which in this case means gematria in one way, but it also means a code in another. Yatas adach hugchamt. So these are not words. I just want to be clear. Says the Gemara, my parish lehu, it's atbash. So an atbash, an aleph is traded with a taf. A beis is traded with a shin. A gimel is traded with a, resh, vichule. So therefore, yatas, adach pugchamt is mana takel ufras. And this is actually shtei pasuk. This is a pasuk that can be found in Sefer Daniel. And we don't know what these words mean yet. Mana, what does the word mana mean? Mana elaka malchus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu has chosen you. Takil, what does it mean? Tekilta b'moznia, you've slipped on your scales. V'ishtakach chasir, and you were found to be missing. What does parsin mean in this phrase from Daniel? Prisas malchuscha v'yavas l'madai paras. You're losing your kingship, it's going to go to somebody else. Now that was just one version of what Belshazzar couldn't read. Here's another one. V'shmuel amar, Mamtos Ninakfi A'alron. So what's this one? Look at this one. The first letter of each word, Mem Nun Aleph. The second letter of each word is another Mem Nun Aleph. The third word is Taklin, right? So the Gemara is it's a cipher. It's a cipher. It's a cipher where the first letter of each word is the first word. The second letter of each word is the second word, B'chule. Rav Yochanan Amar, Anam, Leket Nisrafu. What's this one? This is where the words are backwards. What's Anam in the other direction? Mana. Anam, Mana. Takal. So this is exactly the reverse. And last but not least, Rav Ashi Amar, Nama nama katal porson. Here, just the first two letters are switched. So if you correct the first two letters, it's not nama, it's mana mana takal, right? So then the Gemara is just showing you that they had certain ciphers. So you're right, it was written in the same sound. That's not the problem. The reason Baal Shatzer couldn't read it because it was garbled. It was written in a way that he would never have known. You have to be a Talmud Chacham to know what that means. I don't even understand what it means, and I'm reading it. But there's no way that Baal Shatzer was going to know what it was. So that's what the Gemara means. And that brings us, Baruch Hashem, to a new Mishnah. We're halfway down on Chav Beis Menalef. In Rochben al Suso, a person is not allowed to ride on the horse that belongs to a king. Bein Yoshven al Kisa, you can't sit in his throne, obviously. Bein Mishtamshin B'Sharbito, you're not allowed to use his staff, his scepter. You're not allowed to see him when he gets a haircut. Obviously, one cannot see the king when he's undressed. And when he is in the bathhouse, there should be a degree of Yirah Shamayim, a level of fear that exists with a king. The Gemara opens, Amar of Yaakov, Amar of Yochanan, Avishag muteres l'shlomo ve'asur la'adonia. Avishag was the son of David, was allowed to, in theory, marry Abishag, but Adoniah, who was also the son of David, was not. Muteres l'shlomo de melech. He actually became king. Umelech mishtamish b'sharbito shel melech. And one king can use the scepter of another king. And she functioned, Abishag did not function as a spouse. Abishag functioned, as we'll soon see, as a sochenes, as the Navi calls her, as a warmer. They did not sleep together. David and Abishag did not sleep. The Navi's mufurish, lo yada'adi, that he did not know her biblically. They didn't sleep together. So says the Gemara that just like, as we see in our Mishnah, that someone is not allowed to use the sharvit, but if you are a melech, you can use the sharvit of another melech. So Abishag falls into that category. But that's only as it applies to Shlomo. The Asur la'adonia dehed yodu. He thought he was going to be king, but he wasn't king, so he was not allowed to marry Abishag. Abishag Maihi. Who is Abishag? Dichsiv Amelech David Zakin ba bayamim. Vayomer lo avodav yivakshu. They had to search for a beautiful woman. Uchsiv avakshu na'areya. For they found a beautiful woman. Uchsiv. She would lay there and just be basically just a warmth for him. The Mefarshim here write that the Gzeira Derabanan that we learned about a couple of days ago, about a Pnuya, actually yesterday, on the very top line of Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, we learned that the real Isser Dorais of Yichud is with another married person, lest one come to the Isser of Eshes Ish. But when it comes to a single girl, a single woman, that's only a Gzeira Derabanan. They overrode this Gzeira Derabanan for the sake of David HaMelech. Could you imagine a scenario in 2025 where someone who was of David's stature had a beautiful woman in his room with the door closed? We would never have believed it. But these are people of another caliber. They're people of another caliber. Amra, so Abishag, and again, please excuse the graphic nature of this Gemara. I didn't write it. I'm just translating it. She said, Ninsiban, let's get married. Amar la asirasli. He said, I'm not allowed to marry you. I've maxed out the number of wives that I have. So she thought he was talking garbage. She called him out. Amar le chasre leganva. When a ganav has nothing to steal, he all of a sudden acts righteous. Nafshe l'shlama naki. Everything is wonderful. What was she saying? Well, maybe you're not able. You're an old man. Maybe you're not able to have tash mishamita anymore. So you're throwing a different card. Oh, I married too many people. So this part of the Gemara, Omer Dorsheni. Amar lahu karli le Bas Sheva. Go get me my actual wife, Bas Sheva. Uchsiva tavo Bas Sheva al hamelech hachadra. She showed up in the room. Amar Yehuda Amar Rab, that he slept with his wife 13 times. Ba'osa shah kincha Bas Sheva b'shlosh esrei mapos. She would wipe herself. She would clean herself after every tash mishamita. They were together 13 times. Obviously, Abishag wasn't in the room. That's a huge lack of tznius. And obviously, we don't understand what's going on here on the surface. Pasha, that's true. But the point was that he was able to show that it wasn't an issue of tash mishamita. He was really being sincere. He would have married Abishag. He wasn't allowed. It was usher for him to marry Abishag. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Shemin bar Abba, bo urei kama kashin gerushin. Come see how difficult it is to get divorced. Hare David HaMelech itiru lo liyachid. David HaMelech, as mentioned, was allowed to be in yichud. They allowed David to overrule and override the rule of the Gezer of Yichud, but he wasn't allowed to divorce one of his current wives. Amar Rabbi Eliezer, Kol Megarishes Ishto Rishona, a person who divorces his first wife, Afil Mizbech, Mored loved most. The Mizbech sheds tears. Nice homily. Shenamar, two psukim, one that seemingly has little to do with the other. V'zo shenis ta'asu ksus dimas ha-Mizbech Hashem, bechi v'anaka me'ain od panos al-Mizbech, so that first pasuk speaks about Dima es hamizbech. Uchsi ve'amartem alma. The next pasuk says, why is it that it's crying? Al ki Hashem he'id beincho vein eshes neurecha, the woman of your youth, asher ata bagadata ba, you rebelled against her. V'hi chavertucha ve'eshes brisecha, she's your friend and she's the one who you made a covenant to. And so that we see that the reason for the tears in the mizbech was that the marriage ended. Rabbi Yochanan v'Temel Rabbi Lazar ein ishto shel adam mesa elim kain mevakshen mimenu mamon ve'ein lo. A man's wife could die if he is asked to pay a debt and he doesn't have money to pay. Ve'ein lo, shenamar, the pasuk says, v'im ein lecha l'shalem lama yikach mishkavcha mitachtecha. You have no money. I don't want to end up taking away your wife. Rabbi Yochanan kol adam shemesa ishto rishona. If a man rachmana litzlan loses his first wife, ki ilu cherev Charav Beis Hamikdash b'yamav. It feels like, again, it seems that way. It feels like the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed in his day. Shnei ben Adam hinani lokech mimechas machmad einecha b'magefa. I'm taking away that which is precious in your eyes in a plague. Lo tispod v'lo sivke. No eulogies, no hespedim, and no crying. V'lo savod imasecha. No tears. Uchsiv adaber al ha'am baboker v'atamas ishti berev. And the wife died. Uchsiv hinani mechalales. Mikdashi gaon uschem machmad einechem. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The machmad einechem, play on words from machmad before, which is that she is the precious one to him. And last of the middle width lines, 7 lines from the bottom, Amar Balachsandri, Kol Adam Shemesa Ishto B'Yamav Olam Chashach Ba'ado. His world is very dark after a person's wife dies. Shinamar, or Choshech Ba'oholo V'Neiro Alav Yeda'acha. Rabbi Yossi Breb Chanina Amar, Psiosav Miskatros, he takes smaller steps. Shinamar Yitrot Tzadi Ono. Rabbi Abo Amar Atzaso, no fellas, his Eitza is no longer good. Shinamar Batishlacheo Atzaso. Amar Rabbi Bar Barchan Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kasha Lezavgam Kekrias Yamsuf, famous Gemara, a very well-known Gemara. It's not really sourced here. It actually belongs elsewhere in Tainus. But the Gemara says it's difficult to be mezavek zivugim k'kriyas yamsuf. Shenamar lokim moshiv yechidim ba'isa motzi asirim b'chosharos. Al tikri motzi asirim ela kim motzi asirim, like people who are getting out of jail. Al tikri b'chosharos ela bechi v'shiros. But it'll be just like kriyas yamsuf, where there was both bechi and shiros. Eini, says the Gemara, is that really true? How can you say that it's kasha l'zabek zivugim kikriyas yamsuf? Ha'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rab Arba'im Yom Kodim Yitziras Havlad Bas Kol Yotzeis V'Amar Ploni Bas Ploni LePloni. It's not difficult to get married. Kadosh Baruch Hu made the decision before the child was born, 40 days before the Vlad was created. Says the Gemara, famous answer: Lo kasha b'zivug rishon b'zivug sheni. You're right. The first zivug is a piece of cake. Kadosh Baruch Hu already made the decision. Karesh is going to marry Shechter. Everything's going to be okay. And what does it mean that it's kasha l'zavek zivugim? That wasn't talking about a first marriage, but rather habezivug sheni. That was talking about a second marriage. That's way more complicated. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Nachman l'chol yesh tmura chutz me'eshes nirim. Everything can be replaced except for a first wife, the woman of a person's youth. Amar be'eshes nirim kisima. Masni Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Yitzchak Berei ein adam motze koras ruach el mi'ishto rishon. A person only has koras ruach from their first wife. Turning to the top of Chav Beis Medbeis, at the very top line of the page. Amar lo kegon man, and he said, let's just get who's talking here, because this is a bit of a funny story over here. The Gemara says Rav Yehuda was talking to his son Rav Yitzchak. So the father said, "I'm telling you, I get nachas ruach from my wife. Amar lo kegon man, amar lo kegon imcha. I get nachas ruach from your mother." So the son pays it. When we fight in front of our kids, they know that we're fighting. But look at this Gemara. Is this true? Another story took place between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak, again, father and son. I find women to be absolutely bitter, and they trap me in their nets. Amar lo, Rabbi Yitzchak, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said, "Kegon man, v'amar le, kegon imcha." Your mother does this to me. She's the one who's bitter and the one who constantly traps me. So you can't tell me that at the same time, in one breath, you're telling me that that she is Eina the Motze Korah Surach except for the first wife, and that she's Motzi Ani Marmi Maves. So says the Gemara, she worked on her midos. Miskapt Kiva, Shitaka was very strong, but Iburi Ma'avra B'mila, and she managed to work on herself to the point that she could be Ma'aber. What does it mean to be Ma'aber? Says Rashi, top of the page, she was able to overcome her tendencies. That is very impressive. I think so many of us in the world are so wired and kind of baked into our brains as to how we react. We're almost puppets in that way. We're programmed. When we see X, we react with Y. She was willing to be stronger than her function, than her brain was. 6 lines down, Chav Beis Amud Beis, Amar Reb Shmuel Bar Onya Mishmei Rav Isha Golam. A woman before she has Tashma Shamita, she's not really complete. She's kind of like a golem who's missing the piece of paper that activates the golem and makes them the real deal. Ve'ena koreses bris elel misha asakli. She's really only kores bris, unique language that applies usually not to women. Says the Gemara, only to the one who makes her into a kli, which is the first time she has Tashma Shamita. Shenamar kivu alayich osayich. Your husband, he creates you, he makes you. That doesn't mean that he makes her, it just means that through Tashma Shamita and removing her besulim, that makes her complete. Hashem Svako Shemum. Tana the Brisa says, 8 lines down, 9 lines down, Ein ish meis ela leishto. A man, when he dies, his wife is the one who feels it the most. Ve'ein isha mesa ela lebaila. And when a woman dies, her husband feels it the most. Ein ish mesa ela leishto shneimar v'yamasali melech ish Naomi. And we see that there's a reference that when he died, it refers to the wife. Ein isha mesa ela lebaila. The husband's suffering the most. Shneimar v'ani bevui mi padan mesa alai Rachel. It was Mesa Alai that he said about himself, that Yaakov said that was very hard for him. Then we said, Ein Roanos. What? Oh, that's a flex for Shnai Mikra right there. That's what's going on. Oh, really? That's a bigger flex. That's a bigger flex than that. That was a huge flex. Of Torah. What do you? That's amazing. Why do you know that?
My son's supposed to be doing it and I have to bug him to practice.
Oh, okay. I thought it was because you were a Talmud Chacham. I know. I would have believed you. It's fitting. You're very bright. I would have. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. You know. All right. Beautiful. Thank you for those 2 Mara Makomos. Says the Gemara, Ein Roano, so we're not allowed to see the king. Tan Rabbanan, Melech Mistaper B'chol Yom. A king has to look spitz. He always has to have a haircut every day. They have to make sure his hair looks perfect. Kohen Gadol Erev Shabbos, he gets once a week. Kohen Hedjot Echad L'Shloshim Yom, once every 30 days. Melech Mistaper B'chol Yom, Shnamar Melech B'Yof Yov Techzen Einecha. He needs to always look wonderful. Therefore, he gets a haircut every day. Third of the way down at the 2 dots. Kohen Gadol Erev Shabbos, and the next Erev Shabbos. Because that's when when the mishmaros would change, and every mishmar should see that the Kohen Gadol looks spitz. Kohen Hedjot Echad L'Shloshim Yom Dechsiv Rosham Lo Yigalchu Ufer Lo Yishalechu Kasom Yichsimu Es Roshem. You should trim their heads. V'yelit Pera Pera Minazir. How do we know that the Kohen Hedjot is 30 days? Ksiv Hacha Pera Lo Yishalechu Ksiv Hasam Gadol Pera Se'ar Rosho Ma'alahalan Shloshim Avkan Shloshim. Just like by Nazirus it's 30 days, so too over here. Because of the word para, we have Gzera Shava, so therefore we extend the same rules by Nazir. What is the rule by Nazir? Says the Gemara, 1/3 of the way down, 2 lines into the wide lines. It's not Namistam Nazir Shloshim Yom, as we know. If a person accepts upon themselves to become a Nazir, they're going to be a Nazir for 30 days, unless otherwise noted. My son hasn't gotten a haircut in 7 months, but he wasn't Makabal upon. He shaves. He just doesn't cut his hair. So that's not Nazirus. Nazirus would have an Isser on cutting the hairs on your face as well, and all the other things, wine, grapes, all the other different Isur. So you got to be very careful. So that's what the Gemara says. I wonder, I didn't ask him and I didn't ask a Shaila, if a person does a shave al tasa, he doesn't get a haircut, even though he normally would have gotten a haircut, let's say once a month. Is the shave al tasa of what you would have done a positive enough action to create a neder?
Pretty much everything we've told him.
Had to be what? Yeah, it doesn't strike me that would be the case, that it would be enough. But we're also very makbid, like bli neder. He's saying, "I'm not going to get a haircut this month." Bli neder, okay. Good. V'hasam minalan. How do we know by Nazirus that it's 30 days? This we saw. Amar Rav Masna, the Amar Kura Kodesh Yehiyeh, and the Gematria of Yehiyeh, the Gematria Telasin Habu. So that's how we know Stam Nazir to Shloshim Yom from the word Yehiyeh. And therefore we bring that back over to the Gzeir Shava from Pera, from Nazir to Pera to Kohen Gadol, and therefore a Kohen Hedjot, therefore a Kohen Hedjot is once every 30 days. Halfway down. Amar Le Rapava Labai Ema Lo Lirbu Klal. Perhaps we should say that he's not allowed to let his hair grow out at all. That we should let him go any stretch of time. So it says Gemara, if the pasuk would have said you're not allowed to grow your hair, I would agree. But but yeah, there should be you're allowed to grow your hair. You're just not allowed to grow it out very long. So that's how we got to 30 days. Then the Gemara brings up a fascinating discussion about whether or not a Kohen in the modern era is allowed to drink lest the Beis Hamikdash be rebuilt and they have a chiyuv to be in the avoda, because nobody knows what mishmar they have. But my brother-in-law is a Kohen, so I don't know. Maybe he's, please God, the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt, and they're going to call up Yosef Schwartz. It's going to be like, I'm drunk. So are we allowed? Is a Kohen today, 2025? Is a Kohen allowed to drink? Says the Gemara, if what you're saying is true, then ha'idna nami dumya de yayin. Then maybe we should be making some comparisons to yayin. Ma yayin bisman biyahuda aser. Wine at the time that someone is in the Beis Hamikdash is aser, but shelo bisman biyashari. But for a Kohen to drink wine outside of the Beis Hamikdash when it's not his mishmar, that's mutter. Maybe we should say af purei rosh bisman biya aser shelo bisman biyashari. It should just be about attendance. If I have a 24-week cycle, every 24 weeks I get to do a mishmar, I can go 24 weeks without getting it. It's half a year. Leave me alone. Are you allowed to drink wine if you're a Kohen? And even if you're not in the Beis HaMikdash? Vatanya, the Brisa says, Rabbi Omer Ani, classic Rabbi formulation. He says, Kohanim asrum lishtos yain la'olam. Rabbi holds that Kohanim are never allowed to drink. Well, what should I do? Shetakanto, what corrects this and allows them to drink is kilkalto, is the fact that our whole system is mekulkal. Not only do we not have a Beis HaMikdash, that's big problem number one, obviously, but big problem number two is even if we did, we don't know which mishmar any of the Kohanim are. And let's be honest, there are some Kohanim who are probably not Kohanim. They just think they're Kohanim because they saw a kever that said, they saw a kever that had the hands on it, but maybe they were looking at the wrong kever because they don't read Hebrew. We have a lot of these problems. Today I did a bris, a Jewish mother, a non-Jewish father. I mean, really non-Jewish father, just from a different ethnicity. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Dead silent. You're going to tell me that you're a Kohen? What kind of ne'emanos could you have? It's not. You're not holding it all. So there's a lot of reasons why, and therefore Rebbe held that it's takantum kil kalaso. The problem is that we should allow it nowadays because we're so many steps removed. Even if we had a Beis Hamikdash, we wouldn't know who's who. So the people who taka do drink today, who do they hold like? It's Kirebi. Obviously, that's what we just learned. But says the Gemara, there's a problem with that. What does that imply? Mechlal de Rabbanon Asre. This implies that the rabbis do hold that it's taka aser. And it looks like a machlokas tanaim. Rebbe seems to hold that it's mutter because we're too far removed and we don't know who's who. And it seems, just based on the basic inference, if Rebbe holds that it's mutter to drink nowadays because takanto kil kalto, so therefore it must be that the chachamim taka hold that it's usher for a Kohen to drink in 2025. So says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. Hasam in regards to wine, hainu taimam is because mehera yibana beis hamikdash uvoinan Kohen haroy lavoda beleka. This is so beautiful. Our feelings are woven into halacha. We so badly want the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt that according to the Chachamim, you're not allowed to drink wine if you're a Kohen. However, hachanami, by hair, we should say, Ba'ina Kohen haroy lavoda veleka. Why can't I need a haircut? But maybe I should not ever be allowed to grow out my hair. Says Gemara, yeah, but when it comes to hair, hacha, I could go home and shave my head. I'll have no hair in 10 minutes. The whole thing is so easy. So says the Gemara, Hasam Nami after the 9 port of ayil. Maybe if a person drinks a little bit, okay, go take a nap. The Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt. Schwartz, you're on. Go take a 20-minute nap and kind of sleep off your wine. To Amar Ravacha, Derech mil b'shena kolshu. If you walk a mil, which is actually about a mile, and if you sleep a little bit, mefigan esayayin, it waters down the impact of wine. Says the Gemara, didn't we say about that? Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba Barabu, Lo Shanu El Shishasik De Revis. That's only true when is taking a walk or taking a nap helpful to dilute the effects of wine. That's only true if you drink up to a revius, which is, let's call it with the makel sheet to 3.3 ounces. It's Shabbos Kiddush. Aval Yosimich de revius kol shekain de derech toraz to v'shenem hashakarto. Then it's going to make it even worse. You go on a walk when you're drunk and hop in bed, you're gone for the night. You're done. So therefore, up to, that's just how the Gemara seems to, I'm not opposed to it, it's how the Gemara seems to conclude. L'chora, according to the Rabbanan, and the Rabbanan is the majority over Rebbe, if we paskin this way, then a Kohen in 2025 is only allowed to drink up to a revius. Because being Hey Rabbi Amenu, the Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt, and we might need that person to do their avodah. Fascinating. Vashi Amar Shisuya Yayin Demachle Avoda. It's different. There's differences between wine and hair cutting. When it comes to Kohen doing avoda while they're drunk, Gazru Behu Rabbanan, it's Demachle Avoda, it ruins the avoda. Therefore, Gazru Behu Rabbanan, there's now a rabbinic restriction to drink in 2025 because the Beis HaMikdash could be rebuilt instantly, and you're going to be drunk. And if you are drunk when you do the avoda, it's Machle Avoda, it ruins everything halachically. But Pruei Rosh, but when a person just needs a haircut, to lo machle avoda, if you go in there with a big ponytail, long hair, okay, you're in violation of not getting a haircut, but it's not machle avoda. It doesn't ruin the avoda, so therefore lo gazru behu rabbanan. Fascinating. Says the Gemara Meisvei, hold on one second. Ve'elu shebemisa. The following cases are both misa cases. Pruei rosh, people who have too long of hair. Ushasu yayin. It says the Gemara Bishlama shasu yayin dechsiv yayin v'sheichar al teish latova necha v'lo samusi. That I understand. You want to tell me that doing the avodah while you're drunk is problematic? It's an explicit pasuk in the Torah. But how do you know that if you need a haircut and you do the avodah, that's going to be machle avodah, that it's going to ruin the avodah? So says the Gemara, the answer that we might have anticipated, 15 lines from the bottom of the page. Because their taka is a comparison, a hekesh between the two psukim, one that speaks about wine and one that speaks about hair. What's the hekesh? Dichsi, pasuk number 1, v'rosham lo yigalchu per lo yishalechu, uchsiv v'yayin lo yishtu v'gomer, ma shesuya yayin b'misa, just like the avoda that's done by a kohen when he's drunk is b'misa, he'll be punished with death for that. So too, afre rosh b'misa. Says Gemara umina, maybe from that itself, this language is a little wonky. It's not a phrase that we're used to, but maybe it should have said like adirabba. Maybe I can flip things around. Maybe I could have said a little bit differently that really it is machle avoda. Why did you say that it's not machle avoda by the hairs? So says Gemara Kasha, you're right. There actually are two ways to learn this hekesh. So when there's two ways to learn a hekesh, that means we're not sure what the hekesh says. Amrle Ravina the Ravashi. Ha hi adelo asi Yecheskel man umra. What we had never seen really was in a Kohen who does the avoda with long hair. We never really saw those psukim until Yecheskel. These are some of the psukim that we read. So man umra. It's a din d'oraisa. So how can you tell me that you need a haircut and you have to do hair? If that's a din d'oraisa, we didn't see it in Chumash. How did we get to the times of Yechezkel without seeing a pasuk in Chumash or seeing something more explicit? Says the Gemara, that's a terrible question. Ulatameich. Adam Rav Chizda davar zem mitoras Moshe Rabbeinu lo lamanu asher ba Yechezkel v'limdunu kol ben nechar arel lo yochal arel leiv ve'arel basar lo yaval mikdashi l'shar seni. The pasuk says, not in Chumash, the pasuk says in Yechezkel that if somebody has a foreskin, they can't serve in the Beis HaMikdash. Adelo ba Yechezkel man amra. You're going to ask over there as well, who said that? No. El Gemara, Gemirila, we have a tradition, we have halacha l'mosh misinai, that a guy who has an orla, so he's not allowed to go to the Beis HaMikdash. I was supposed to do a bris tomorrow in Luris. The family decided they didn't want me to come in the end. I don't know why they said no, there was no loss. But the bigger surgery was being done by the surgeons. My job was like, don't cut my thumbs. Like they do all the complex work, the surgeons. They hold the last tethered piece of foreskin between their thumbs. They give me a scissors. I tell everyone to say amen. I'm the only yid in the room, me and the baby. I'm like, amen. And then, but the family decided not. So is this kid an Arel? He has no foreskin, but he doesn't have a bris. So these are good shilas. These are good shilas. Anyways, that's what the Gemara says, that we didn't learn that from the Chumash. We learned it as a halacha l'Moshe misinai. So the same thing should be true over here as well. So the cutting of the hair is also a tradition of halacha l'Moshe misinai. My kasomi kasmus roshem. What does the pasuk mean that you should trim your hair? Tana, we have a brisa. Kimin tispores lulianis. It's like getting a lulianis type of haircut. My tispores lulianis. What is that? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel tisporta yechida. It's a very unique haircut. Not helpful. Hechidami. What does the haircut look like? Amar Ravashi, Rosho shelzeh betzadi karo shelzeh. That the head of one hair is by the root of another hair. I don't know what this looks like. I would have said most of our hair is like that. I don't know what this means. Does that mean there was like a band cut out so that I don't know what it means? Shalu es Rabbi Ezu tispor shel kohen gadol. What was the haircut of a kohen gadol? Says the Gemara. Amar lehen su'u ur'u mitispor shel ben elasa. Ben elasa was a kohen gadol apparently. Actually, he wasn't. I take that back. Take a look at Rashi. Ben elasa chasano shel Rabbi Haya v'nasan mamon v'lamdu lo osa tispor. He paid. He was a son-in-law Rabbi, and he paid to find out what the haircut was like. Tanya, the Brisa says, Rabbi Omar, lo alpinan pizer ben elasas ma'osa. Ben Elasa didn't waste his money on getting this fancy haircut, but rather to show, to learn what that haircut actually looked like. I wish they had drawn it. We don't know. But the Kohen Gadol didn't have a regular haircut. He had something very unique going on. And it was this haircut of L'chora, of Tispores Lulianis. We'll stop right here. Hadron Alach Kohen Gadol Baruch Hashem. We finished the second parak of Maseches Sanhedrin. This has got to be one of the most words we've ever learned in a week's time. It's maybe brachos a little bit, maybe, but I don't know. But we'll stop right here. Mir Hashem will pick up tomorrow night with Daf Chav Gimel and Chav Daled and Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.